Hello, everyone. Adam Bergman here, tax attorney and founder of IRA Financial. And on today's video, how to use your IRA to buy real estate. So wanted to spend some time on this topic because it's a topic that keeps coming up. And I've been doing this for 14 years or so. I've been practicing tax law for over 20 years, but in the self-directed IRA industry specifically for 14 years. And I think it's always important to kind of refresh, go back and look at the basics on how to use an IRA to buy real estate, since real estate is by far the most popular asset class for IRA investors. So that's the purpose of today's video, is to kind of go through the basics, talk about how to fund a self-directed IRA, how to use the IRA, the different ways you can use the IRA to buy real estate, and obviously some of the key rules to consider, i.e. prohibited transactions, UBIT, and then some tips at the end of the video on what you need to consider if you are looking to use your IRA to buy real estate. So IRAs were created in 1974 by ERISA. And if you look at the tax code, it doesn't distinguish between an IRA that buys stocks or mutual funds and an IRA that buys real estate. It just talks about the rules governing IRAs. And that's under Section 408. And Section 4975 talks about what you cannot buy in a retirement account. But you're not going to see the word self-directed IRA anywhere in the tax code. It doesn't exist. You'll see IRA, you'll see Roth IRA, SEP, you'll see a 401k. You will not see the word self-directed IRA. Why? Because the intention of the rules when ERISA was promulgated by Congress back in 1974 was to allow IRAs to essentially have a vast selection of opportunities to invest in. It's only because the banks and traditional institutions don't want to get into alternative assets for the simple reason that they don't make money when they let you buy real estate with your IRA. They make money when you buy their products, right? Like stocks, mutual funds, ETFs. When you hold money with them, that's how they make money. They provide investment advice. So even though real estate and precious metals and other alternative assets have always been allowed under the tax code, it's never been advertised, and it has not been allowed by the traditional banks and financial institutions since the creation of IRAs. But obviously that's opened the door for the self-directed IRA industry, which was born the same time the IRA industry was in 1974, to allow retirement account holders to use their retirement accounts to invest in alternative assets like real estate. So over the last, 10 or so years, there's been a huge push from baby boomers, Generation X, millennials to diversify and invest in real estate as well as other alternative assets to not only gain diversification but also invest in assets they know and trust. A lot of folks just trust real estate a lot more than they do stocks, right? Who knows why Wall Street goes up, down, the S&P 500, NASDAQ, it makes no sense. People get real estate, right? You buy a good asset, good neighborhood, you rent it out, assets appreciate. Even if the market drops, you still have a nice hard asset that should be a good hedge against inflation, should produce income stream, and should also appreciate over time. Plus, it's a physical asset, right? Something you can touch, you can see. You have confidence, go to sleep at night knowing I have this house, it's there. I don't know if I own this stock, if it's going to be there or not in the next year or 6 months, if ChatGPT will come in and totally take over and my internet stock that I've owned for the last 12 years is suddenly down 60%. Less so with real estate. So now that we know why people use an IRA to buy real estate, and we know that IRA's rules regarding IRAs have always allowed IRA owners to invest in real estate, the one other advantage that I have not mentioned, which is crucial of why people want to use their IRA and invest in real estate, is tax deferral, right? Just like stocks, when you buy stock and sell it, there's no tax in an IRA, right? If you buy a home for 200K, sell it for $1 million, the 800K goes back to your IRA without tax. If you do that personally or through a business, you pay short-term capital gains or long-term capital gains. With an IRA, you pay nothing. Okay, so obviously deferral, and if you do it in a Roth, no tax, so long as you're over 59 and a half, the Roth's been open 5 years, it's all tax-free. So it's a huge opportunity. And when you couple that with the fact that you can diversify, invest in a hard asset, invest in an asset you know and trust, now you can see why real estate has become the most popular asset class for alternative assets for IRA owners. The funny thing is, people don't realize this, right? It's not just real estate investors. It's tax lawyers, it's doctors, it's other lawyers that whenever I get a chance to encounter those folks, whether it's through business, socially, and they're just like, "Wow, you sure? I can't believe you could buy real estate in IRA. Never heard that." Right. And that's actually, the story behind how I started IRA Financial. I was a tax lawyer in New York City, large law firm, and someone asked me to um, research whether a client can use their IRA to invest in a hedge fund. And I had no idea. And I was a tax lawyer 9 years at big law firms. I have a master's in tax law. Pretty smart guy. I had no idea. I actually thought you had to buy stocks with your IRA because that is what my 401k and my former employer IRA funds have always done. Just never knew that you can do this. So obviously my eyes opened really wide. I got super excited. It's like, wow, I get to use my tax background to really show people how many options they have in a retirement account. It's right in the code, right? And that's the goal of IRA Financial, be the first company to let people do alternative assets, real estate, cryptos, and ultimately even traditional assets, which we hope to launch shortly, where you'll be able to do everything under one platform. So now let's just focus on real estate. Two types of self-directed IRAs. The first is called the full service self-directed IRA. It's the most traditional type, most common. It can be used for IRAs, Roth, SEP, Simples. And basically, you use a special IRA custodian like IRA Financial. We're a regulated trust company. We do not provide investment advice. We don't sell products, right? Our only function is to facilitate alternative asset investments and to custody alternative asset investments. We're regulated, audited. So that is our expertise and our specialty. We do not sell traditional investments. We only focus on alternative. That's why we really don't compete with the Fidelities of the world because we don't want to, right? We do what we do right and better than them, which is alternative assets. So with a full service self-directed IRA, it's simple. You go, on our app, IRA Financial Group.com, IRA Financial, IRA Financial Trust. You open an account in minutes, and essentially you can roll over former employer 401k, IRA, Roth, SEP, Simple, tax-free into a self-directed IRA, which is really just an IRA that is allowed to do alternative assets, right? The word self-directed IRA it's not a legal term. It's just a word. You can call it direct XYZ IRA, you call it Adam Bergman IRA, you call it IRA Financial IRA. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that you can do alternative assets. So once you move your funds tax-free to IRA Financial, then IRA Financial will then buy the asset directly. That's called the full service custodian model. Title to the real estate will be in the name of IRA Financial Trust for the benefit of Adam Bergman IRA, and all the income and expenses would need to flow through IRA Financial, whether it's paying taxes, paying a contractor, and of course, all rental income will flow back to the IRA without tax. The second way to do a real estate investment is through a IRA LLC, known as checkbook control, self-directed IRA LLC. Really what you're doing is you're just simply inserting an LLC underneath the IRA. So you have the IRA here through IRA Financial Trust. You have the LLC right here. I'm making a triangle because an LLC is a pass-through entity. Think of it as a funnel. There's no entity level tax. It's a tax nothing. And since IRAs don't pay tax, right, they're exempt as per section 408, 501, just like a charity. And an LLC doesn't pay tax. There is no tax on that investment structure. But what it does do is an LLC gives you limited liability protection, meaning it protects all your other retirement assets outside of the LLC. You can be the manager of the LLC. So the IRA owner can serve as manager of the LLC, giving you what is known as checkbook control. So you can write check, you can do a wire, an ACH, Zelle, Venmo, whatever you want to get things done, which is super helpful and advantageous. And then ultimately, titles in the name of the LLC, not the IRA. So you get a sense of privacy as well. So depending on the real estate transaction, if you're doing a lot of activity, right, you got rental income coming in every month, you got fix and flips, Airbnbs, just a lot of action on that particular real estate property. The LLC makes a lot of sense, right? You get an upfront cost, right? We got to set up the LLC, the operating agreement. But after that, it's the same annual self-directed IRA fee. So there's no additional fee year after year other than a special, well, depending on the state, but relatively small LLC filing fee. If it's a single member LLC, there's no partnership return, there's no tax filing. So multiple member LLC, a partnership return has to be filed, which we'll do for you if you're a client of IRA Financial, but there's no tax due, right? It's just a information report. But using the LC again is super popular because you have more control. You're the manager. You can control the money through the checkbook. You get the limited liability protection, which I think is super important. You also get a sense of privacy, which to some people is super vital. And then ultimately, you can just get things done quicker, right? You don't need to wait on the custodian to write a check, to pay a contractor, pay a plumber. You just have a little bit more hands-on control. Even though it's still owned by the LLC, and the LLC is owned by the IRA, you're not personally benefiting. You just have a little bit more control over the process. So those are the two ways to use an IRA to buy real estate. What are the most popular ways to fund an IRA? Well, contribution, definitely not. What 2023, you're limited to 6,500 or 7,500 if you're over 50. So obviously, it takes time to get up to a number where you can actually buy a piece of property. So rollover is the most important. Okay, a direct rollover is when you move money from a 401k to an IRA. Okay, and direct rollovers are tax free. That is the most common way to fund an IRA, and approximately $500 billion of rollovers each year. So it happens a lot, right? I saw a statistic that there's 70% of employers, had, or no, yeah, approximately 70% had a change of job in the last 5 years. So people are moving around. Okay, so when you're moving around and most, I think around 60-something% have access to a 401k at work, you're going to have money left over. So what do? Right? Most people will port it to an IRA. Why? IRAs have more investment options and just better distribution flexibility rules. Whereas if it's in a 401k, you're kind of limited to what the plan offers from an investment standpoint. You won't be able to generally invest individual stocks. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do real estate or cryptos and precious metals. So you're going to be limited. And also there's triggering rules on when you can pull the money out, harder to satisfy hardship rules, just a little bit more complicated. And also in some cases, fees could be higher. So your actual asset value could drop based off the fees paid to the advisor of the plan. So all in all, people just generally move their money out of their IRA. And again, when you separate from your employer, you generally don't want to call them back, right? To get your money out or just deal with them. You're done. You want to move on. So the number one direct rollover approach is to an IRA. It's tax-free. You can do it anytime. The second is move it to your new employer, which the limitation on that is you're stuck in a 401k. Thirdly, you can leave it there, which some people do. In fact, some businesses won't even let you leave the money there just because they don't want the administrative costs of dealing with your 401k if you're not an employer. And there's something called a safe harbor IRA. If you have less than $5,000 in a 401k and the company has what's called a safe harbor IRA provision in their plan, they can essentially force you or force that account to another IRA custodian if you don't tell them what to do. And basically, that custodian will basically just put the money in a money market until you claim it. So that is definitely not what you want to do. I always suggest if you leave your job, ask your HR department if you have money in a 401k. Yeah, it's true. Not everyone knows they have a 401k. Why? Because a lot of companies auto enroll you. And if you're not contributing, they may be putting 3 or 4% of your paycheck in it without you knowing. So if you've been there 3-4 years, you may have decent amount of money, several $1,000s that if you don't say anything and you don't tell them what to do, they're just going to force it and port it to a custodian that you don't know of, and they're just literally going to basically deplete that account from fees because it's going to earn a very small return, and the fees they charge are just going to deplete the account. So make sure you know where your money is. Ask the question because you may not be aware of it. But rollover is the most popular way to fund an IRA. And then second is contribution, which takes many, many years to be able to build an IRA, but that also is a nice way to do it. So now let's get into what you can't do with an IRA, right? We talked about all the important stuff, what it is, what a self-directed IRA is, different types, benefits of doing alternative assets with an IRA. Let's talk about what you can't do. But actually, before we do that, let's talk about what's the most popular type of real estate that I've seen in the last year or so. And it's really residential still the most popular. Haven't seen as many fix and flips as I did 5 years ago. Obviously, asset values, but it's starting. There has been a drop in value. Other than Florida and Texas, I mean, the rest of the country has seen drops in real estate prices. So people are starting to see opportunities. A lot of people are moving off the sidelines, getting more active. So definitely real estate, Airbnb, residential is hot too. Short-term rentals, commercial not as big, but huge movement into hard money loans since banks have been less interested to lend, especially on short-term basis, to developers. Seen tons of clients getting in lately. Hard money loans, 6 to 12 month loans to get that developer to that next stage. And the returns are great, right? With interest rates being super high, you're getting 15, 18%, pretty secure. So that's been super advantageous. And real estate loans are very, 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 very attractive in an IRA. Why? If you generate interest income, personally, it's ordinary income, not capital gains. It's ordinary income. If you do it in a IRA, it's tax free, right? It goes back to the IRA tax deferred. So loans, investment loans in an IRA, super tax advantageous, more so than buying and selling stock or cryptos or flipping homes, because that's a capital gains tax. If it's over 12 months, it's around 15 to 20%, depending on your tax bracket. Whereas ordinary income for interest can go up to 37%. Same as short-term capital gains. So having that in an IRA and sheltering it is very advantageous. So prohibited transactions. 3 things you can't do. I'm just going to summarize, really focus on the real estate stuff. Section 408 says you can't buy collectibles, life insurance. Okay. Thirdly, Section 4975, which is the broadest category of prohibited transactions, says as follows: you can't do anything in your IRA that directly or indirectly personally benefits you, disqualified person, which is essentially your lineal descendants, parents, children, spouse, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, any entities controlled by such persons, 50% or more. Okay. So let's now take that definition and apply it to some real estate examples. You can't buy a house and live in it. Right? You can't rent a home to your kids. If your company if you own more than 60%, 50% of your company can't rent the property from your IRA. Right? You can't sell a property to your parents. Right? Anything that involves your disqualified people, meaning you or your lineal descendants, or entities 50% or more controlled. That includes LLC, corporations, trusts, where you're 50% or more a beneficiary, or your lineal descendants. Those entities are essentially off limits, and you cannot transact with them in connection with an IRA investment. That's it. It's really all you cannot do. The rest you can do, okay? Except for a potential tax, which we'll get to in a moment, known as UBIT. You can do it. So you can rent to third parties, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, neighbors, all fair game. You can transact with all of them. Even if you own an entity less than 50%, depending on the facts and circumstances, you may be able to transact with that entity. So that's also an interesting opportunity. But it's really, again, lineal descendants, you, and entities 50% or more controlled are disqualified and off limits, and you cannot transact with those folks or those parties when it comes to your IRA. Otherwise, you can do it, right? So it opens up a huge opportunity for real estate investors, whether it's hard money loans, Airbnbs, fixed, flips, residential, commercial. It can be domestic, it could also be international. Nothing in the tax code prohibits you from doing foreign real estate, okay? Whether it's in Cayman, Belize. I've had people buy stuff from crazy places, right? Lebanon, God, I can name the country. I don't think we've done it. Afghanistan has done, India, Pakistan. But depending on the jurisdiction, there's also local real estate rules. For example, if you buy property in India, you have a local partner. A U.S. entity cannot own real estate in India. If you want to buy property along the coast of Mexico, you need to set up a Mexican trust, right? So you can do it. You just want to work with local experts in that jurisdiction to make sure that you're complying with all the real estate transaction formalities. But from an IRA perspective, you can do it. So I mentioned UBIT, unrelated business income tax, which is an ugly 4-letter word. Unrelated business taxable income, UBIT, UDFI, unrelated debt finance income. It's all the same thing. It triggers potentially a 37% tax in 3 instances. Okay, your IRA uses a loan to buy stocks, which is not relevant to real estate. But 2, your IRA uses a loan to buy real estate. The loan needs to be non-recourse. Why? Because 4975, that section I mentioned, also says you cannot personally guarantee an obligation of your IRA. And a regular mortgage, a recourse mortgage, is you personally guarantee it. So it's got to be non-recourse, which means you cannot personally guarantee it. And non-recourse mortgages a bit harder to get. We do have a number of non-recourse lender providers we'll work with. We're happy to share with you, but you're going to probably have to put down at least 35%, and you're going to obviously pay a higher interest rate because the greater risk the lender is taking, since it's not recourse. And then thirdly, if you invest in an active trader business like a real estate investment fund that has leverage or is a business. Okay. So again, in all cases, it has to be non-recourse. Now, how does the tax work? So in simple cases, let's say you put 100K in of IRA money, and you borrow 100K. So you have 50-50 debt to equity, right? Your equity is 100K, your debt's 50K, 100K. So that's out of 200, 100 out of 200, 50% is debt. So let's say you generate $10,000 in net income after rent. Once you collect your rent, depreciation, which you can take in, expenses and the like. And the $10,000, basically, the way the UBIT tax applies is you then 50% of that $10,000, which based off our example is the debt portion, that $5,000 would be subject to the UBIT tax, which once you hit around 14,500 could max out the 37% tax. So it's a high tax at a very low income threshold. Not great situation. I mean, I have some clients that pay it and are just like, I'll deal with it. Others don't like it. Now, if you're a real estate investor, there's one huge exception, and that's the solo 401k. The solo 401k has an exemption under 514C9 of the tax code that lets a 401k use leverage, non-recourse loan, to acquire real estate without triggering the UBIT tax. So it's a huge, massive tax opportunity, which I've talked about at length and at nausea over the last, how many years. So the good thing is a lot of real estate investors are self-employed. So if you can fit into it, you should probably look to do the solo K over the IRA, which I've written 2 books on it. We have probably 7,000 solo 401k clients. So we have a lot of expertise in that area, but just being able to use leverage without paying the UBIT tax of up to 37% is a monster advantage. Okay, that if you're in the real estate world, other people's money, right? OPM. It's all about OPM. Use other people's money. That's how you scale. That's how you can buy more assets with less risk. So no matter who you are, you want to use leverage, right? Even Warren Buffett, if he buys a real estate asset, will use a loan. He's not going to pay cash for it. Just makes no sense. You got deductions for it. You could just buy more. There's no point. Now, obviously, when interest rates were 3%, a little more attractive than at 8%, but nevertheless, real estate investors are still looking to use leverage. So with the solo 401k, you can get around the UBIT tax, which is a massive win, which is what a lot of folks try to do. But again, going back to the IRA world, if you just can't get into solo K, why? You need to be eligible. Who's eligible? You have a business. It can be any business, sole proprietor, LLC, corp, S corp. You can do anything. It doesn't have to be a $1 billion business, right? You can be a math tutor, a consultant, you can sell shoes on eBay, it can be a swimming teacher, a lifeguard, doesn't matter. Just got to either sell a widget or sell a service. And there cannot be any full-time employees that work more than 1,000 hours or 3 consecutive years of 500 hours or more that are non-owners and the spouses of owners. So if you're an owner and your spouses, those are good. They do not count as employees. But if you have a non-owner that is not the spouse of the owner, so just a random person that works more than 1,000 hours or 3 consecutive years of 500 hours or more, you can have a solo K. Okay, even if you have 5 partners, 10 partners, you can do it. So from a real estate perspective, it's huge. The solo K also lets you put away up to 66,000 or 73.5 if you're over 50. There's a loan provision that lets you borrow up to 50K, tax-free, penalty-free, easy administration, and obviously you get this huge benefit to get around UBIT, which is super attractive. So that is essentially UBIT. It also could apply on a sale. If you sell the real estate and there's a loan outstanding within 12 months of the sale, that UBIT could also apply on the sale. So it's a really painful tax for real estate investors. And that's why that exemption for solo 401ks or 401ks is so important to at least consider if you can fit into the solo 401k requirements. Let's go to tips. what you'd be thinking about if you want to do this. Number one, do your research. You make money when you buy it. The self-directed IRA is not going to make you the money, the structure. It's the price you pay. So do your research, do your diligence. If you can visit the property, do it. Look online. Make sure the price is right. I've been in this space 14 years, and all the people that I've seen their retirement accounts massively increase, they've all made money on the buy, whether it was stocks, cryptos, or real estate. So try to buy at the right price. Number two, you want to make sure you got enough money in there, right? Let's say you have 100K, property cost 100. You're going to need some cash left over, right? There may be some improvements you need to do. Maybe the boiler breaks down, there's a leak, whatever. I mean, there's taxes, right? Let's say your tenant doesn't pay the rent on time, or just is a deadbeat tenant. Takes time to evict that person. You want to have a little bit of surplus. Now you can always make contributions to the IRA of 6,500 or 7,500 if you're over 50 to help fund any surplus, any issue where there is a lack of funds. You can also borrow money from a third party. That would trigger UBIT, but it could be from a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, friend. You can add more money to the structure if you have other retirement money, but make sure you got a cushion. If you're nearing RMD age, 73 years old, make sure you got enough cash flow. The RMD is 3 to 4% of your IRA value. So if you have 100K, assume it's going to be around 4K. Make sure you got the cash flow. Okay, you just don't want to have to sell the asset to come up with 4 grand, right? If you have an LLC, we can do things where we can take an interest in the LLC to satisfy it, but it's just much cleaner if you have some cash. You can also satisfy the RMD with any other IRA, not necessarily that self-directed IRA. So just kind of be aware of that. Obviously, just UBIT is big, right? You got to think about UBIT. To me, UBIT's bigger issue than prohibited transactions. People, it's very rare. Less than 1% of people are trying to do, something just that's out there, right? Like, oh, I'm going to buy this house and I'm going to rent it to my, daughter's boyfriend, and my daughter will stay there. Like, you get folks that do that, but it's so rare. Most people want to stay within the rules, and the prohibited transactions generally just not a big issue. You have to obviously consider it, understand them, navigate them, which is what we do really well. UBIT's the killer. UBIT's the killer. So just think about it. If there's leverage, okay, you're using an IRA to buy real estate through a pass-through entity. If you use a C corp like a REIT, the C corp blocks it in. That's why there's no UBIT when you buy a publicly traded security like Apple or Tesla. Right, they're companies. You would think there'd be UBIT, but no, C corp blocks the UBIT. Think of it as like a big box, right? Like these, it's a big box. Whereas a partnership is a funnel. It's like nothing. It's invisible. And by using a partnership, the UBIT tax unfortunately gets imposed on the partnership. Whereas if it's a C corp, the corporation pays 21% tax. So there's already tax there. The UBIT tax doesn't need to go above that. But if it is a partnership, that's where the UBIT tax gets imposed. So that's something to consider. It's it can turn a really tax advantage investment into something that's very tax unfriendly. So one way to get around it, I mentioned the solo K. Another way to get around it is just put a corp there, right? Instead of the LLC, have your IRA invest in a C corp. C corp buys the real estate. Yes, you'll pay 21% tax, but 21% is less than 37%. So you can minimize the UBIT. I can't erase it. It's almost impossible, even if you use a foreign blocker. Something called FERPTA and branch profit tax becomes almost impossible, which that's a topic for another very confusing video. The foreign tax regime of the United States is probably the most complex. I took a number of tax courses on foreign taxation. It was the hardest 2 classes I ever took in my life. So I would not suggest kind of figuring that out on your own. So just trust me on that. It's very hard to shelter real estate from UBIT. The C corp is one way to limit it, and then the only really way to eliminate it is the solo 401k plan. But you got to be eligible, and satisfy the fact that you need to be a business with no non-owner or spouses as full-time employees. That's kind of it. It's actually really simple. I'd say probably over 60% of our clients are in real estate. Obviously, they've done super well over the last 13, 14 years. Um, you know, if you don't want to be actively involved, there's fractional real estate. We do some stuff with like a Realty Mogul, Yield Street. There's ways that you can get involved and own real estate passively, just fractionally. So let's say you have 30K, 50K, and you just want to kind of dip your toes in the real estate pool. You can do it, without actually owning the actual hard asset. You can invest in a real estate fund, which is pretty cool. But if you want to actually own the hard asset, obviously going back to the first point is do your research, know what you're buying, especially if you're doing foreign real estate. I mean, you're not going to be able to use US courts if you have a problem. So let's say you buy something in Belize or Mexico or Dominican, and there's an issue, it's going to cost you money to get it resolved. A lot cheaper in the United States. You can obviously understand the rules, easier to comprehend, and easier to enforce any type of action. Much more difficult outside the United States. So that's really it. I kind of touched on everything. Just going back to the beginning of like what the IRA is, dating back to ERISA 1974, its creation, difference between IRAs and self-directed IRAs, the two different types of self-directed IRAs, full service, checkbook. Then we talked about why you want to do real estate, diversification, deferral, tax-free growth, hedge against inflation, invest in hard assets. And then we talked about prohibited transactions and UBIT, that's ugly four-letter word. And then finished up with some tips to consider if you are buying real estate. And also, obviously, I mentioned how to fund the self-directed IRA, which generally through rollover from a former employer or an IRA transfer, two most common ways, and also through contributions. But again, that's going to limit you to 65 or 7,500 if you're over 15, 20, 23, or the set amount. Probably do the solo K maybe next week or next few weeks, the next video. Maybe we'll talk solo 401k in real estate, since seems like it's a pretty hot topic, since real estate I expect to be a super attractive, super hot investment, especially as prices come down. People are starting to move off the sidelines and focusing more on getting exposure to real estate back in their retirement accounts. Probably even see a movement back to some fix and flips. Airbnb has been hot. Just the cash flow is great. People are still traveling, spending money, short-term rentals. So I also expect that to be pretty hot. So on the exit, obviously, if you're not using leverage, you sell the asset. It goes back to the IRA with a tax, just like stocks, just like any IRA asset, which is the name of the game. That's what we're here for, right? How do you shelter income? How do you defer taxes? Defer taxes through a traditional IRA, shelter from a Roth. So long as you're 59 and a half, Roth's been open at least 5 years, bank, all tax free. That's it. Appreciate you guys spending some time here today. If you are a client of IRA Financial, hopefully this is just a review. You know it all because you're smart and you've talked to our amazing team. If you're not a client of IRA Financial, well, great. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope I can share some of my knowledge. I love this space. I love helping people, educating people on the power of the self-directed IRA. It's an industry that keeps growing immensely over the last 10 years. Some great companies in the space. We're all regulated, and we all want to help. So hopefully this is kind of whet your appetite to learn more about self-directed, whether it's real estate, whether it's alternatives. Diversification is key. Hedge against inflation, investing in assets and trust. I just think you become a better investor when you care about what you're investing in, right? Like if you invest in mutual funds and you don't really care, you're not looking at it, you'll be fine. Hopefully you have a good advisor. But if you're super passionate about real estate and this is what you're doing, you're looking at the market, you're looking at opportunities, driving around town, driving around your community, looking at deals, you're going to do better. It's just like anything. The more you focus, the more attention you put in, the better you're going to be. And that applies to retirement account investing. So thanks again. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a comment. Subscribe to this amazing YouTube channel. Yeah, it is amazing. We do some great content. I'm super proud. The content, we have just a great team of people that I work with that kind of help. So appreciate your support and have an amazing rest of your day. And I hope to see everyone again on the next live video. Take care.